and you'd mentioned you got shot. Can you really talk about that?
Yeah. I was 18. I was walking through the projects at around 2 in the morning, left a party. Two guys started walking up on me. They had bandanas on. I thought they were a couple of friends of mine from the party playing jokes on me. So I'm like, hey, man, take the bandanas off. Take the bandanas off. You're getting me nervous. They're like, what do you mean we're getting you nervous? And they pulled out the guns and just started firing. I was actually walking through the basketball court when it happened. I turned around, put my head between my legs and took off. I got hit right here, fell to the ground, felt like something lifted me off the ground and pushed me. That's when I really started to believe in like angels and stuff, because I felt like something protected me that night, and it did. I ran to the bus stop, started checking myself all crazy, took my shirt off, and then I felt the blood on the side.
Welcome back to the Invest in Yourself podcast. I'm your host, Adrian Martinez, and today I'm joined by one of the best money counterfeiters known, Arthur Williams Jr. During today's podcast, Arthur shares his early life as a criminal, which led him to counterfeiting a boatload of money. Arthur had a very interesting way of exchanging his money to get real money. He had quite a run while he was on the street, but it all came down landing him in prison for a number of years. Since Arthur has been out of prison, he has changed his life around completely. He has written some books, and he's mainly became very successful at becoming an artist. Please subscribe to my channel for more interviews like this, and without further ado, let's get into Arthur's story. All right, welcome back everyone to another episode of the Invest in Yourself podcast. I got a really interesting guest on. His name is Arthur Williams Jr. He was a money counterfeiter, and now he has turned artist. So he really has a really good redemption story, and he's had a lot of rough bumps in the road, but he was able to manage to get out of the criminal life and really change his life around. So Arthur, I really appreciate you taking out some time and coming on my podcast, man. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, yeah, I'm just glad you made time for the opportunity. So for you, I think a really good way to start with your story is the beginning. Like, what was it like for you growing up, and what got you into, I suppose, crime? And then we can go into what got you into counterfeiting.
Well, it started when I was extremely young. My father and mother, they didn't last. My dad took off, and when that happened, we ended up homeless for a little while. Ended up in a shelter, and so we went from living in the suburbs with a family, pretty much overnight, on the south side of Chicago, in the projects. So the transition was, to say the least, it was pretty tough, right? I think I was around 11 at that time. It was 1985, and it was 1985 when the Bears won. And so yeah, it was just, went from, the suburbs to the projects, and then the projects, there was the poverty there. So you had to deal with the gangs, the drugs. There was a lot of different things that went with that. And so for me, the first time that I got into the crime was breaking into the parking meters. And that was just out of, coming home from school one day and seeing my mom, crying at the window. And, I'm asking her what's wrong with her. And she's telling me, because there's no food in the fridge. And when I look, there isn't any food in the fridge. And, here we are, in America, right? And people, we didn't have no food, right? So it was one of those moments, and I grabbed my brother and I ran out. And, from there, I just walking down Halston Street, hitting the parking meters and hearing the change ring. I was like, in my mind, I'm like, there's money in there. And so I just started to inspect the meters, and then figured out how to open them up, and I took the change and went and bought groceries. And so for me, crime was more of a survival thing. And maybe it is for most. I mean, some it might be for an addiction. Me, it was for food and shoes, and so, and a lot of it in when I was growing up, because there were other children that dealt with the same thing I did, the struggles of poverty. And so, from the meters, it went from the meters to then breaking into cars, breaking into garages, stealing bikes, just whatever it took to, to get some currency, so to speak, to live, to eat, to clothe yourself. Um,
Yeah, I mean, you had a really different upbringing. Like you were in this mid suburban area to just going straight to the hood, I guess. And like after that, it just really had this whole mindset change. And for you, you just really wanted to survive and provide for your mom. And what about your siblings and stuff like that? What was the situation with them? And were you the older brother, kind of looking out for them?
yeah, yeah, I was their older brother, and my sister, she was a year younger than me. My brother was 3 years younger than me. They both dealt with uh, the poverty differently, right? My brother, I've lost him to it. My sister, she dealt with some pretty tough things and even tried to end her life at one time because of it. So the childhood was extreme. I think that what helped me get through it is I've always had this sense of looking for the best in things. Even as a kid, I always would daydream or visualize a different world, right? So my mind always was very creative. I didn't become an artist until, of course, I went to prison. But when I was young, I had a vivid imagination, you know, and I think that that imagination saved me, right? Not just from um, creating a scenario in my mind that allows me to deal with the things around me, but then the imagination to do crime, right? I mean, I got imaginative on a lot of things, and when it came to it, not just the meters, but all, you know, I literally broke into a warehouse to steal paper one time. Like, who would ever do that, right? Paper. So I've done some crimes that even those were like, what were you thinking? But
Right.
there was a plan for it. There was always an end game for it. It wasn't just some delusional concept I was coming up. There was things that I always were planned, and and they might be a lot different than what most might think. So I mean, crime was just a way to take care of myself, and then once you get into that mindset of survival, you know it's hard to think outside of that. I think I always believed that I had to have a moral compass to certain things. I mean, that's the reason I went so heavily into counterfeiting, because I really I lost the my mom used to take us to church and we prayed every morning, but I was just that rambunctious young kid running the streets. So I never really thought much of it when she did that, but it actually put a moral compass within me, you know, where I even though I was running the streets, I still cared about people, you know, and that stayed with me all the way till now, and I think that it allowed me not to become bitter or harsh because of the things that I went through, whether it was not having food or seeing one of my friends get killed. I had 6 friends die by the time I was 19, murdered, shot, gang violence, right? That's a fact, right? 6 of them.
It's terrible.
Probably 20, I've been shot, right? I've been shot in my side, but I think there was probably around 30 or 40 of us that hung together in the projects. We were like a little family growing up. I think maybe 80% of us had been shot at one point or another. I mean, though that was actually probably the most detrimental thing to my childhood was seeing my friends killed at a young age, and waking up every morning and going outside and wondering if you're going to get shot that day because you knew there were going to be bullets flying at some part of the day. I remember when guns hit the street. So that would have been, I was 11. The guns hit the street probably like the end of the 80s, 89, right in the beginning of the 90s. And literally up until that point, gang warfare was really, bats, knives, chain, like the old 70s movies,
Hmm.
And then just out of nowhere one year, you had guns everywhere. They were the Larsons. It was a LLARSONS. I'll never forget it. 25 little 25 automatics, 380s, they just flooded the streets. Like they were just dumping them on the streets, right? Crates of them. You can get them for like $50, $100 a gun. And when that happened, that's when you seen uh, the murder rate and people being shot just go through the roof. And I used to always wonder, like, how does Larson get away with that, right? Like, I know they say that we have the right to bear arms, but there's no right to make arms,
Mm-hmm.
right? You don't have the right to make a gun, you know? If your guns are getting in the hands of kids and they're killing each other, your right to make that pistol should be yanked from you. But the government passed a law stating that there's no liability for gun companies, which to me is just absolutely absurd, right? It's not for the people, that's for sure. That law that they made wasn't for the people of America. It's made for the gun companies. So they can make their guns and then they can give them to the people and they can kill each other. And that's what they've been doing for, at least on the south side of Chicago, for a long time. So I never understood how that happened, but it did. And they flooded the market, flooded the streets with those little guns. And then it just got bigger and bigger and bigger, right? It went from a little 25 and a 38 before long. Cats were carrying machine guns and throwing grenades. I mean, literally, I heard a grenade go off one time. A
Gee.
grenade on the south side of Chicago, grenade, right?
War
How did
zone.
you get a grenade, right? So these questions I always ask, but you know, yeah. So I think for me, the biggest thing that was for me to deal with was just the violence. There was a lot of violence growing up, you
And
know.
yeah, and you'd mentioned you got shot. Can you really talk about that on here?
Yeah. I was 18. I was walking through the projects at around 2 a.m. Left a party. Two guys started walking up on me. They had bandanas on. I thought they were a couple of friends of mine from the party playing jokes on me. So I'm like, hey, man, take the bandanas off. Take the bandanas off. You're getting me nervous. They were like, what do you mean we're getting nervous? And they pulled out the guns and just started firing. I was standing by the basketball court. I was actually walking through the basketball court when it happened. You know, I turned around, put my head between my legs and took off. I got hit right here, fell to the ground. It felt like something lifted me off the ground and pushed me. You know, that's when I really started to believe in like angels and stuff, right? Because I felt like something protect me that night, and it did. I ran to the bus stop, started checking myself all crazy, took my shirt off, and then I felt the blood on the side. You know, it was for I say that's actually what spurred me to leave Chicago. One of the first that was like one of the first incidents where I said, okay, I'm done with this, man. I got to get out of here. So one thing about me, because when I was really young with my father, we traveled. You know, he was a paper hanger. He used to hang checks, right? Right. He'd open up an account in a town, get the checkbook, go write up a bunch of checks for products, and take the products back, get the cash, and then jump town, close the account, right? That's what you call a paper hanger. And that's what my dad did. So even as a young kid, you know, he would bring us around on these crazy, you know, criminal sprees. But because of that, there was a part of me that didn't ever really feel um, stationed anywhere. Right? I didn't fear moving. I didn't fear. Matter of fact, there was a part of me that liked to see the world. That liked to be. Maybe it was because of that with my father. I don't know. So my time at the projects, you know, there were families in there that had been there generations, couple generations. Even now today, I haven't been there in 30 years, maybe 40 years. And there's still people from that I grew up with that are there right now. Right. So it's a generational thing that happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When we were there, I didn't ever see myself staying there. I didn't ever see that my future was in the projects, living this life. There was always a part of me that was dreaming to get out of it, to get out of it, to get out of it, you know? And I think that subconscious training that I did, that I was going to leave, that my mind found a way for me to escape the place, you know, whether I did it consciously or not, you know. And that's what happened when I got shot. I got to the point where I said, okay, I got to get out of here. And I went down to Texas.
And when you got there, did you have family or someone that you moved in with, friends down there, or?
Yeah, my grandfather had died and left my mom a house in Gainesville, Texas, and so I had been going back and forth from Texas to Chicago since I was little. So my dad was from Chicago, my mom was from Gainesville, Texas, and so we had always went back and forth. We lived in Texas for a year, and then we live up north for a couple years, and so there was or we go down to Texas to visit my mom's parents, So there was always this movement between Chicago and Texas since I was young, and I loved it there. I really did love it there. Still do. I still love Texas. And and
Well,
so
I was gonna say, does this like, when did the money counterfeiting part come? Is this kind of a part of the story, like, when you went down to Texas?
well, that's when I brought it back up. But the
Okay.
it started when I was young. When living in the projects, I got into a little bit of trouble stealing a car. One of my mom's friends came to get me out. Uh, and he happened to be an old time counterfeiter from the neighborhood, Italian dude that I termed it Da Vinci, his name. And, he took me in for about 9 months, maybe a little bit longer. And then he ended up, just one day not ever showing up again. That was the one thing about my neighborhood, Bridgeport. It was organized crime heavily when I was growing up. Not so much anymore, but it's still there. But when I was growing up, it was you had the Chinatown crew on 26th Street, and so people disappeared, people got shot, people got killed. I mean, that was just part of my neighborhood. So when he didn't show up, and then I just kind of assumed that something happened. Especially when he was gone for a little bit longer than just not showing up, right? Just like he's gone.
Even to this day, you've never
Yeah,
heard nothing or anything?
yeah. I
Damn,
got three friends that just disappeared. Another friend of mine, Mike Titman, just
nothing.
disappeared, just gone. Just
It's
it's
nuts.
when it happens when you have friends that just vanish.
Yeah, that's a trip.
Yeah, yeah, it's a trip. No, no, childhood was a trip. He didn't teach me enough for me to go on my own. During that time, I was about 15, but he taught me enough for me to understand the equipment, the offset press, plate maker, right? These types of things, because I made money in an older way. I mean, I made it in every way, pretty much, right? I mean, I've used every different machine you could probably use, but the final product, when I feel like the money became the best ever, it was by combining the offset and the new technology, digital, together, right? So that's what I felt like that's what my legacy would be in that world, right? That I took the offset press, I used it for certain aspects of the printing, but then I used the digital printers for another aspect of the printing. And I brought those two together, right? And then the other thing I did, I was able to create paper that felt like money, and you could see the watermark in the strip and things like that. And so, for me, what he taught me when I was 15 was enough for me to take later on in life to really expand. Because what he was doing the old small head 100. So when I was with him, the big 100 wasn't even out yet. The 1996, that still hadn't been around, right? So,
Mhm.
um, and then that's basically what happened. When I went down to Texas, I brought the same attitude and character there, which ended up landing me in prison for a couple years. And when I got out, the girl I was with, she bought me a book. It was a Bruce Lee book by uh, Jeet Kune Do, Bruce Lee. I love martial arts, fighting. That's why I do a lot of things for the fighting community now. Donate paintings to boxing and stuff. Give kids something to do. And when she went to pay for the book, they marked it with a pen and just threw it in the drawer. They didn't look at it. They didn't inspect it. They just marked it with the pen, threw it in. And and right then and there, I'm like, wow, if somebody could figure out how to make this thing mark, man, you could have a run. right? You could have a nice run because this is all people do now. And so that's where the real journey began, right? Going on, the hunt for the paper and and getting all the, it eventually became a process. It was like 12 steps. By the time I figured out how to do the paper and the shifting ink and the watermark and the strip and all the different components that went into the money, it was like an assembly line, handcrafted assembly line. The same way I do my art. I pretty much took the same process I did with the counterfeit and I do with my art now. I put watermarks in my art. I do all kinds of really neat things in my art, right? I'll
Mm-hmm.
do a various amount of pieces at one time and run them all through, right? And that's that's one of the many awesome things about what I do now as an artist, because I use a lot of the techniques that I did with my money on my art, even the way I make my paint, you know?
Yeah. You're
Um,
able to apply it to the
yeah,
real world, the legit world.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome.
Well, so with this process, what did that look like? Like, what kind of equipment and stuff like that did you really need to make this happen? Because you had like 12 different little processes that you do.
So the thing about the process, and it's so funny because I had just seen this other counterfeiter that's been on podcasts, Jeff Turner, talking about he had read my book to be, and that kind of led him to it.
Damn.
That he couldn't figure out how to use my paper because and then he went and used Bible paper, right? Which I had tried Bible paper, but the paper I used, it was it was the best out of everything I'd ever tried. But I had to add a chemical to it, right? There was a spray process I did that would make it feel like money and be crispy. And I never gave that secret up, right? So like I've been real cautious with like explaining things out because I don't want people to follow that stuff,
I get it. I
and
get it.
done it. But as far as like, I mean, I could tell you I used an offset press to tint the paper, right? Where I just made the color of the paper. So for me, when I made my money, I tried to mimic what the Federal Reserve did, which was layers, right?
Hmm.
Which is like my painting now, right? I do layers with my painting. And basically, a lot of counterfeiters, they try to do the image all at one time, where they print the whole image at once. Whereas I would run it through, right? I would print only one thing of the image and master that, right? Get that to the most perfect I could. And then jump to the next thing and print the seals and make sure those seals are perfect. And
Hmm.
as long as I got my register right on my printing, everything would line up perfect. So there was a mathematical part of it too, right? Where I had to make sure everything lined up. My process was extremely difficult. It was long. It was tedious, because I'd had these strips that I laid, so I basically handcrafted the money. But I got it to a point to where I could do a table run, which is what I'd call it, a 50,000 at a time, right? And I might be able to do, you know, probably say go through that process 5 times in a run, right? But that's really working, and that's really getting down, you know. Um, and then to get to that process of the table run, I it might take me a couple weeks, right?
Um,
Yeah. So like I said, it would go from the printing steps, which would be the offset into the digital. Then it would go into the cutting phases, and then it would go into the putting it together, right? Which was the most difficult phase, right? And then it would go into hanging it, letting it dry, and then spraying it. So basically, I just kind of gave you a quick run without going into detail how I did those things, right? But those were the different processes that it went through, right? It went through the printing, the cutting, the putting it together, the drying, the spraying, right? And then
yeah.
there'd be little in between ones for those.
So, so what would you end up doing, like with spending wise? How would you go about spending money? Did you give it to, did you have people helping you that you can talk about, or did you just do all this by yourself, really?
I mean, at first it was just spend it, going to the malls, buy things at first for us, right? And it used to be a kick when you see the people pull out the marker and mark it and take the bill. There was a really like it was a cool feeling that you knew you overcame what you had sought out to do, right? Because that's what it was. I wanted to overcome that marker, and now here I did. And so at first we just traveled everywhere. Me and Natalie, we would go everywhere. We find little malls, right? We'd hit the big ones too, but I was like the back road king. I mean, I hit every back road in this country, man. It's like veins, man. Maybe I'll do a painting one day of just all the back roads I've been on. So we'd find out these little towns. They had these little malls, and we hit the back road, get to that and hit the mall. And sometimes I could hit 2 or 3 towns in one day. And we would buy things. At first it was just, like I said, buy things for us. And then it was buy things for our family. And then it got to the point to where it just seemed you could only get yourself so much. I mean, I guess there's some people who could keep buying for themselves, but for me, I got to the point where I'm like, man, this is just too much. I got like 100 jeans I don't need 100 jeans. I don't need that, right?
Right.
Kind of shifted to buying things for kids. And it solved a few things. One, when you're driving around the country and you got a truckload of merch, and if a cop stops you, that looks a little funny, right?
Yeah.
And especially if you got like wads of cash, 20s, 5s, 10s, and 1s, just doesn't look right. So by giving this stuff away in the town that we spent the money at, we would find a Salvation Army drop box, a charity box, whatever. You empty your car, right? Your car is empty now. Now you got nothing in it. None of the evidence is with you anymore. Get rid of all the receipts, get rid of everything. Now you're clean. And then the money you wrap up real tight, seal it, hide it, And so that was the one thing. And but then the biggest thing about it was I grew up in the projects poor with nothing. So I really did want to help kids. I still do. It's my character towards that hasn't changed, right? I still donate paintings for kids' causes, man, because I know how hard it is growing up,
Yeah.
So
It was
that
like you said, that moral compass you had, like it guided you in some kind of way still through your life of crime that ended up now you use it a lot more in, in the right aspects and stuff. But you at the time that was the thinking, right? Like you donate these jeans and stuff. And I like with the counterfeiting money too, like how does it affect the economy?
well, there's not enough counterfeiters out there to affect it, right? Counterfeiting is pretty much a dead art, right? I mean, they're saying there's a little bit of a comeback, but when you consider how much money's circulating in the system, the counterfeiter has very little, impact on that. The bigger part is when like other countries counterfeit money, right? Like North Korea used to counterfeit a lot of money. Colombia, a lot of counterfeit money used to come out of. Even the Middle East, Israel, Israelis used to be some of the biggest counterfeiters ever, right? Nobody knows that, but yeah, that's a fact, right? So it's when other countries start counterfeiting the currency to use it that it can cause a little bit of an issue. But there's been very few like individual counterfeiters like myself who could ever affect the economy in any manner because they usually don't last long. The
Yeah,
Secret
no.
Service are really good at their job. Um,
I would hope so.
I mean, they will get you, right? The Secret Service will get you. There's no
Well,
doubt. There's no hiding from them. There's no, there may be a few counterfeiters out there who did it and got away, uh, but that's highly unlikely because the longer you do something, uh, the more the more the more there's a chance that you're going to make a mistake and the Secret Service are going to be there to get you.
right.
So, you
Well,
know,
I was gonna ask you, what were your close calls where you almost got busted?
I mean, we had a few, one time my paper fell apart, right? While we were spending it, the hundreds fell
Ooh,
apart because it
dang.
was out, right? and the glue didn't work, and the humidity for some reason. I ended up fixing that problem, but it fell apart. The bill literally fell apart. We had escaped. Um, I was on the run for 12 days, and I was hiding out in the hotel, and they almost got me there. I was pulled over once, and I had fake identification. I literally had like $5,000 of money in my in my my jacket while I'm sitting in the car talking to the cop. Right, you know that was a really close one. I've had a bunch, man. And but what's helped me, and I guess this kind of sucks in a way for others, but I genuinely, when I'm out, I'll shave my goatee. I got my glasses. I look like a doctor.
Yeah, that's true.
Chicago counterfeiter, man. I could change the appearance real quick. My wife jokes about it. She's like, "You're like a chameleon, Art. I've seen you change a few times since I've been with you. So, I think that for me, yeah, there was a lot of close times. And then the closest time is when you go to prison, right? That's when you get caught, right? So, and the last time that I went to prison, I actually ended up there with my son, which was terrible. It was a terrible thing.
What went down with that? Because he ended up getting involved with counterfeiting too. So,
Well,
he wasn't. Oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
I'll go ahead. I mean, he wanted to be like his dad. You know,
Yeah.
he respect. He wanted, he loved me, and he wanted to be like me, and what he knew of me from Rolling Stone magazine and other things like this, because I was in Rolling Stone. There was a book being wrote about me. So to him, I was like super cool, right? He's like, I got the cool dad. Your dad drives a trash truck. My dad's a cop. You know what I'm saying? So in his mind, he had a different perception of me, and he wanted to be like me. And it was a terrible situation, right? Because here I am, me and him get into it. He was making money, $20 bills, and it pretty much jammed me up and set me off for 7 years. And then he joined me about 3 years into my sentence, or maybe longer, because at two yeah. So I was locked up about 4 years before my son came to prison. He was 18, looked like a little baby face. And they actually put us together, which I'm thankful for, because he needed me there. And while we were in prison, we actually became best friends, and it even taught me how to be a dad. You know, so
Damn, in all the places.
yeah, crazy place to learn how to be a father, right?
Yeah.
But I
So, how
did.
explain that, yeah, explain how that worked.
Well, by the time that he had came to prison, I had already created a pretty intense regimen for myself. I woke up at 5 in the morning every day and I wrote. My dream was to be a writer, not a painter. I wrote a book called Cain's Dagger that I self-published when I got out of prison, which at some point I think I'll revisit at some point in my life. But as I would wake up at 5 in the morning, I would write for a couple hours, go to breakfast, come back, do my little prison duty. They give you a little job that you got to do. Uh, eat lunch, go work out, come back in, do dinner, and then go paint all night. So my regiment was very strict every day, and that's how they call it bitten. Doing a prison. You got to bit. You got to figure out how to make your days go by quick, and the best way to do that is if you stick to a schedule every single day. Get busy doing something. And so when me and him were brought together, I was bitten. I was already on a movement, man. I had every morning, boom, 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 every night, boom, boom, boom. So I got him doing the same, right? I got him back into his music. I got him into an illegal boxing, right? They had a little illegal boxing going on, right, in the back, because I wanted him to learn how to protect himself. And I got him into writing, right? He started writing again. I got him into piano lessons. He was starting to learn how to play the piano. So I was by what I was doing, by my personal regiment of getting up, writing, working out, all this. I wanted him to look up to those things, right? Not the counterfeiting, and then show him how to do it, right? Now in prison, it was a lot easier because we didn't have the distractions of the free world, right?
Right.
And so he would listen and he would follow, right? And so he looked up to me enough to listen. Okay, Dad, I'm gonna start writing my music again. Okay, Dad, I'm gonna take piano lessons. Okay, I'm gonna do the boxing, right? I'm gonna work out, right? And so he got on his regiment because of what he was seeing me do. And guess what happened? He got out of prison. He's doing great. Just bought him a house. He's even started painting. Right? He just did this Mr. Burns Simpson piece that I love.
Wow. That's
He,
cool.
so that's how I became a father. Right? That's how I learned how to become a father. Children really do uh, look up to the father. I know there's this whole thing, man. The father's not needed or whatever. That's all bullshit, man. The father is needed. That's the reason why the world is jacked up, because a lot of children in this world don't have fathers. You
I
know,
can see that. Yeah.
it's
Sure.
a fact, man. It's a fact. I see it in my own family. When I'm gone out of town for a week, my wife does not treat my children the way I do. I love them, I hug them, but I discipline them.
Hmm.
And she loves them, hug them, and then snuggle them more. There's a difference.
Yeah. I get it. Yeah.
And so, I didn't have that. Look what happened. And a matter of fact, the proof is in the pudding. 80% of cats in prison don't have dads. Right?
Yeah.
So that's the proof right there. If you don't have a dad, your likelihood to end up in prison are going to be pretty high. So people that dismiss that, man, I really just, it's very disappointing that people could even think that way. They need to go walk through prison and ask how many of these people had pops. And then maybe that'll change their mind a little bit, right? Because 80%, maybe 90% of cats in prison don't have dads.
I
So
mean,
I am being
even,
a cat in prison, which the other amazing thing was, it was inspiring other men in there to be better dads when they got out. I would have inmates come up to me, like, man, I see how you and your son are, and I want to have that with my children when I get out. And now I tell them, well, be a good influence. Be a good influence. I wasn't in prison doing drugs, smoking cigarettes, gambling, shooting the shit, watching TV all day, right? I wasn't doing that. Because if I was doing that, which I'd say 80% of people in prison are doing, then that's what my son would have been doing.
right. Absolutely.
Right. But because I created a regiment of writing, of painting, of working out, of studying, reading every night. He'd see me read every night before I go to bed. I still do. Guess what? He started reading at night.
Lead by example.
Lead by example, man. That's what it's about. And that's even what my life is about now. With the title of your podcast is Reinvesting in Yourself, right? The truth is, I really don't even like talking about my counterfeit no more. I don't like it. I'm an artist now. I'm not a counterfeiter. I'm a family man. I'm not a criminal. And as interesting as that life was, my life is just as interesting now as an artist, man. I travel everywhere. I meet the craziest people. I've had people pretend to be me. I've had people steal from me. I mean, my art career is wild, man.
Hmm.
And
It's
then
really grown.
yeah, but I understand that the art or the counterfeiting is a very, it's a major part of my past that's led me to where I am now. Um, but it's the reinvestment, right? Like for me as an artist, I've been an independent artist for 8 years now, and I've paid for my own events. I've had 4 galleries now that I've opened across the country. I've had one in Beverly Hills, I had one in Melrose, I had one in Boca Raton, and of course, the foundation one was in Chicago on the South Side on Morgan Street, still right in the neighborhood.
That's
Kept that
awesome.
for 8 years. But I had learned, early in my art career that I had to, the galleries wouldn't accept me because I didn't go to school to be an artist. I didn't have an art manager. I didn't have an art publisher. So the galleries, man, they snubbed me. Oh, he's just a criminal, right? They didn't look at me as an artist. And so I had to open my own gallery, right? I had to create my own network. I had to sell my own art. And being an artist is expensive. It ain't cheap, man. The paints, the canvases, the woods, the traveling, the hotels, the food. Man, it's like any other business. You got to put it in. You got to work hard, 14, 16 hours a day. Sometimes I don't have a day off. I've had times where I've worked 3, 4 months straight, man. Now, maybe not as hard on certain days, right?
Hmm.
Every day I had to contribute to what I wanted to do every day. Right? Every day I had to wake up and contribute a little bit, right? Because that's really what it comes down to with any business, is that you have to keep. My kids are acting crazy, right?
It's all good, man. I get it. Like I told you, I got a little one. But just
But
continue, man.
but with any business, you have to invest in yourself, whether it's time, money, studying, right? Like I studied all the masters. I still study them. I'm doing a collection of 100 paintings based off all the greatest artists that I love. Magritte, Banksy, even some newer ones, Monopoly I love because the dude, he ended up getting arrested at one of his shows, how Monopoly did, man. I thought that was cool, and I could
Because
relate.
you've been there. Yeah, you can relate. You've
I
been
could
there.
relate to it, So
Mhm.
I'm gonna do a tribute to him, and then he'll probably be one of the only live artists that I do a tribute to. But
Mhm.
most of them are dead, that I'm doing. But I'm studying. I'm studying the artist, studying Picasso, and then I'm going and doing some tribute to Picasso. I'm studying Magritte, who used to actually be a Belgian counterfeiter, right? So there were other counterfeiters that became famous artists too, right?
Right, of
And
course.
but that's the thing about reinvesting yourself. It's about giving given the time. If you want to be an entrepreneur, you got millions of people out there trying to be an entrepreneur, right?
True.
And so the like I'm and I don't compare myself to other artists. I don't have time. I need to create, work, move forward. I'm not thinking about what this cat's doing or what he has or whatever. No, it's just right here. I'm in my lane, you know? Because once you start comparing yourself to others, then that's when insecurities and other things will set in. Because you might not have the success that he's having right now or she. And you compare yourself to that. Why ain't I there yet? Right? That's a thought you don't want in your mind, you know? My thoughts is, I'm gonna be there. I'll be there. I'm just, at some point I'm gonna be there, right? I don't think about not being there. I think about I will be there, right? So that it's a mental thing too. But
I
for
like that.
yeah,
I can relate to what you're saying, especially in the podcast
yeah,
space, like what I'm doing. Same thing, and it applies to whatever everyone is doing. You just have to be patient. Everyone has their own
their own time.
marathon that they're on, right?
Yeah, and and like I said, for me, I still study, and then when I make money, I put it into myself. I don't live lavishly. I don't have a crazy watch, and I have a little house for my children and a car to move around, and then the rest of it I put into my art, you
Yeah,
know, and
absolutely.
and so you have to make those sacrifices. You have to get up when you don't want to get up, right? You hear people say it all the time, but it's just the truth. You have to outwork the next person, right? And so for me, I always had a really good work ethic in the sense that uh, once I have a vision of what I want to do and that fire lights up, whether it was printing money or making art, right? It doesn't matter. I let that fire, where I wake up in the morning, I have purpose, right? I think that's what a lot of people are missing these days is purpose, right? They wake up all groggy and not feeling, what am I, today, another day, right? They're lacking that purpose in their life. And to me, that's like one of the most important things you could have to find happiness. It's
True.
not, it's not accolades. It's what is your purpose, man, to wake up every day. All
Yeah.
right.
Yours is art, mine is podcast, and then
Yeah,
of course family and everything else. But I'm just saying, like something that would drive you to work towards and continue to grow and build every day. That you wake up, you're like, all right, let's go. Let's. I'm ready for another day, and that's exactly how I feel with my show, and I can tell with you with your art. You gotta have that.
yeah, no. It's like I said, I just had a show on Friday at the London House. It was amazing. I just had a book come out, The Last Counterfeiter. And so I thought it would be interesting to combine the book with my art, right? And it turned out amazing. But the thing that was the most amazing about it, and somebody had brought it up to me yesterday, a woman who had attended the show, she said, "Man, I gotta tell you, it was such an experience because of who you are in the groups that you run with, people love you and come out and see you. And so the crowd was of such a variety that I had not ever seen before, right? You had cats from Detroit over here. You had some South Side Italians over here. You had some Irish boys over here from St. Louis. You had cats from Florida coming in, right? You had attorneys, doctors, entrepreneurs. So, and the crowd was so diverse, man, you know? And I think to me that's almost as special as the painting, right? The paintings. Like I say now that, I create a piece of art, it's a painting, but it's really not complete until it's in the room with all the paintings and in the room with all the people.
True.
Then it becomes complete, the piece, right? And because the whole thing is the art, man, right? And so seeing these people, I got guys from Detroit walking around with some of my Jewish friends, right? Talking about art. Think about
Yeah.
that. You got Detroit guys and some Chicago Jewish guys walking piece to piece talking art, man. Where did that ever happen at, man? That was awesome. It was awesome. There's nothing like it, So for me, that's the blessing of being an artist now. It's bringing the people together and seeing them just laugh and have fun and energy good, So, it's a good time right now. I was able to take everything, even the streets, and bring it into this world, right? You know, so there's guys that I grew up on the South Side. They've never been to an art show, right? They never been to,
No, it's
but
not something there.
I'm not ashamed to have them there. They're my boys.
Right. Of
They deserve
course.
it there, you know. They're not animals. They're not savages, right? I mean, they're respectful. They're cool, right? They might talk a little different. They might perceive things a little bit different than most because the streets deals with different things, man.
Mhm.
So
Well, I
yeah,
was gonna I was gonna say, no, I mean, that's why I reached out to you. I'm glad we were able to do this podcast because you have a really good redemption story and you're still continuing to do good things and pursuing art that is really your passion and driving you to really want to wake up every day and just work towards something and to come from where you came from and been and go to prison and do all those things. It just goes to show that someone could change their life around and can do great things after, man. So you're a walking redemption story, man. That's what I can say. So I do appreciate it, Arthur. Any final words?
to just kind of go off what you said. I was 40 years old, getting out of prison, been there 3 times already. No high school diploma, no college degree, and now here I am, 10 years later, from 40. Going into galleries, having events at places like London House, Rolls Royce, Satai, Miami, right? And that shows right there that even amongst the worst situations, poverty, mental illness, death, prison, you can still change. You can still change. There's nothing stopping you from making your life better except you. That's it. And it all starts with the thought, right? What are you thinking every morning? You thinking negatively? Or you thinking things are terrible? Or you thinking that life can't get better? Well, guess what? It won't. But even in the midst of real hardship, if you're thinking, I got this, I got it, you'll be successful. You'll rise above it, man. So I appreciate what you do with this podcast. The reinvestment, I think is really important for people to reinvest in not just their company, but themselves, right? Reinvest in your mind, reinvest in your heart, reinvest in your physical, you know, And then reinvest in your business, man. Reinvest in what your purpose and passion is, and what you're doing. And if that happens, the world will become a better place. People will be more happy.
True.
You'll walk downtown, everyone won't have a grin on their face. You know what I'm saying? Everyone will be smiling. Hey, man, what's up? Hey. You walk downtown, man, it looks like people just, came back from a funeral, man. The world get happy again. That's what needs to happen. The world needs to get happy again. The world ain't happy right now, man.
No.
So how do we do that? With art, with this, with podcasts, with whatever? We have to make the world happy again, give purpose. That's where I'll leave it.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. And everyone, thank you for watching, and of course, we'll see everyone on the next one. Arthur has one phenomenal story. This man went from being a money counterfeiter to an artist. Now that's insane. His story just proves that when you change your life around, you can go on to do something great. He puts his whole life into his work, and it is now paying off. Please comment any key takeaways that you got from this interview with Arthur. Please share it with anyone that you think will enjoy this type of content. Also, if you enjoyed the interview, please hit the like button because it really does go a long way for me. And if you want to get my podcast episodes when they come out, please hit the notification bell. I also did a little bonus clip with Arthur, and if you want to access that bonus clip, please go to the video description and become a member. It's $5 a month. You can get access to early podcast episodes coming out and also exclusive bonus clips. Please subscribe to my channel for more interviews like this, and thank you again so much for taking out time to watch my podcast. We'll see you on the next one.